Welcome to the Crypto Teacher. And you know I come back with that video just to make you think.
Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
And we had the Rare Bloom event going on. And those who have my NWO book know all about Ben Goertzel. The automation takeover is about to begin. And we know the NWO puppets all have their own agenda. All are working on something different. But they all come back and talk about key points of the NWO's agenda, like climate change, global warming. And we know when it comes to technology, if you have real builders, the technology just keeps getting more advanced. And we have Singularity Net starting on Ethereum, moving on to Cardano, now starting a side chain, which is Hypercycle. Now, guys, when we look at the fourth industrial revolution, what's not being talked about, but was being talked about 2 years ago, was smart cities, and we know Singularity Net has the blueprint. And that's how we know they have the robots, algorithms, and drones ready to go. And that's the reason why they keep using the terminology hard landing or soft landing, because that's how they're going to land us in the fourth industrial revolution. Now we have Scaramucci on CNBC speaking about China and America's relationship. And guys, we know we have midterms coming up. And then also we have Xi being voted in again. And we know the Hegelian dialectic is about to be turned up. And there's going to be a clash. And we know this clash was orchestrated back in the 80s. The fall of America to Babylon and the rise of China the dragon. And remember, the Crypto Teacher wrote about it a long time ago because he knows when it comes to the New World Order, it's all planned out. You have a wonderful day.
2001, I wrote a book called Creating Internet Intelligence, and I was exploring, among other things, the potential of making a decentralized infrastructure for the world's AI to make it harder for the powers that be to take control of AI once it started getting smarter and smarter and smarter and toward the human level. And made some movements toward building that and found the decentralized aspect was very hard and slowed things down quite a lot. So when Bitcoin came out, I was very curious, very interested. Beautiful sort of piece of computer science, putting distributed computing and crypto together. I certainly didn't foresee everything that would emerge from the crypto economy and ecosystem, or I'd be a much wealthier person now. And I also didn't like the sort of needless acceleration of the heat death of the universe and global warming and so on, just from the whole mining aspect. So still, when Ethereum came out, even though it had proof of work, which got on my nerves, and even though the Solidity language got on my nerves even more, really, it was a tractable way to start building toward what Vitalik called a world computer, right? And it was quite cool. I started screwing around with the code, along probably with many others in this room, and that led to forming Singularity Net, which we built initially on Ethereum as a decentralized AI platform. I mean, because it was there and it was the easiest thing to screw around with at that time. So at some point, not too long after that, it came to my attention someone had been crazy enough to start building a blockchain on the Haskell language. And this definitely got my attention, because I'd programmed Haskell fairly intensively in the period like 92 to 95, when it was before GHC. You had the Gopher interpreter, and there was no monad, so it was a quite raw Haskell, but it was still conceptually very powerful. So seeing that the whole Haskell ecosystem had matured enough, you could really build a scalable blockchain on it was super exciting. And so I started plunging into the Cardano universe, and then finding to my amusement that the thing that had attracted me to Cardano was one of the aspects a lot of people were bitching about, which was because they didn't want to have to learn Haskell. But for me, that was like, I mean, if you're going to put the whole world economy on some decentralized network, let's make it in a language that isn't prone to a ridiculous number of bugs, and that is even amenable to doing formal verification, right? I mean, it seemed like a no-brainer, but yet nobody else was doing something like that in a serious way. So we're now, as I'll talk about in my talk this afternoon, we're in the midst of porting SingularityNet to Cardano. Now, in my journey, in my journey through the blockchain space, as well as encountering Charles and Cardano, I encountered some other fascinating characters, mostly in a bad way, but occasionally in a good way. And on the better side, we had some guys named Tufi Saliba and his colleague Dan Tolliver. They had created a novel sort of blockchain called TODA, T-O-D-A, T-O for Tufi, D-A for Dan. So they've got a fairly deterministic algorithm for naming things. And Tufi and Dan explained to me their TODA scheme for doing blockchain without the ledger. And that immediately made a lot of sense, because keeping this replicated ledger, this replication of this huge database copied all over the place, seemed like somehow that can't scale if you want to automate the entire world economy in a decentralized way. And sharding works around that a bit, but what Tufi and Dan are doing is like sharding all the way down. So like each node, each network participant owns a Merkle tree with their history and pieces of the history of their neighbors. And there is no big chunky ledger that needs to be copied or subdivided. So I thought that was super, super cool, but it didn't have smart contracts. It was a very fascinating way to do, distributed decentralized computing and consensus and so on. And this finally led myself, Tufi, Dan, and some others to come up with the Hypercycle project, which I believe Tufi's going to talk about. Actually, I don't know what he's talking about in the video we're about to show, but maybe he thought Rare Bloom was a mushroom growing convention. But I think what he's going to talk about is Hypercycle, which is the project that we have founded together to bring together the TODA ledgerless blockchain, which I believe can bring much greater scale, lower cost, and greater security in various senses than ledger-based architectures. Bringing that together with Cardano, and particularly with the Plutus smart contracts language and the extended UTXO model. So we're rolling out Hypercycle initially as a Cardano sidechain. It also has a cross-chain aspect and is compatible with various other chains out there. And I'll talk more about that in my talk at 3. Tufi is going to give
what I know you were coming on to talk about, which is the direction of China and how you think that's going to change the dynamic and relationship with the U.S. or not, frankly.
It does sort of tie in together because these regimes are different from us. Obviously, they're not democracies. In the case of Saudi Arabia, it's a monarchy. But it's a benign monarchy, more or less, but for the fiasco that took place a few years ago. But I just want to focus on China for a few seconds because I think this is super important to what's going on in the macro backdrop. China, the currency's down 7%. The youth unemployment is at 20%. There's a regime change going on, and with the regime change, and when I say a regime change, you say, well, what do you mean? The president's been the president for the last 12 years, but it's a different thing that he's deploying now. This is becoming more autocratic. They're using the AI not for the development of their economy, but for surveillance. They're also crimping capital controls. And so the regime is actually changing. It's becoming more insular. It's becoming tougher. And I think they're making colossal mistakes because if you go back over the 25-year period of time, dating back prior to the World Trade Organization, China was in a symbiosis with the West where we were sharing technology. When I used to travel over there, Andrew, the notion was a transfer of technology to China. That is not happening anymore. And of course, they've got the COVID problem. You and I both know that if they don't end the lockdowns, they could see upwards of 10 million deaths because they just don't have the hospital beds to handle a potential renewed wave of the pandemic. So I'm super worried about that dynamic. It's not great for the West. We need to have a better economic relationship with China. and it'll be up to China to make that happen. Last point I want to make, he's overestimating, like President Putin, his military, and I think that's also a dangerous thing for the world.
We're going to a different economy, and we're going to be learning more about that as we go, but clearly we're learning that things can be done from remote locations. We're learning that technology can replace people even more than we thought.
We're not going back to the same economy. We're recovering, but to a different economy, and it'll be one that is more leveraged to technology. And I worry that that is going to make it even more difficult than it was for many workers.
In Silicon Valley, and my friends who work in technology know that what we did to the manufacturing workers, we are now going to do to the retail workers, the call center workers, the fast food workers, the truck drivers, and then even bookkeepers, accountants, insurance agents, lawyers, and on through the economy. So what happened to the manufacturing workers is a very clear sign.
This effort. And China has big plans for this. They intend to seed their digital yuan into the global environment by giving it away to visitors at next winter's Olympics. When they arrive at the airport, they're going to get yuan digital wallets. They're going to receive digital yuan. They're going to use it throughout their visits to Beijing, and then they're going to take it back to their home countries. They see this as a huge advantage. Why? Because who controls the underlying protocols, who controls the underlying standards of the future of money will control the future of money.
The most powerful person in the world is the storyteller. The storyteller sets the vision, values, and agenda of an entire generation to come. Steve Jobs. And guys, you know I truly believe in this. When you look at the New World Order, they're the storytellers. And that's the reason why I wrote my New World Order book. But guys, now it's time to change the current generation. And I wrote 3 kids' books. You know I love the Trinity because I understand the power that's in it. So I have 3 books. We have an opportunity to change the generation, to educate, not just me, but I want to show you that I take action on a daily basis. And I want you to take action on a daily basis. Whether it's your job, whether it's in your community, we have an opportunity right now to educate the masses. I posted this on my Twitter account. Please share, but this is a short clip of the 3 books. There's going to be a clothing line and action figures. Please get these books for your kids, nephews, cousins, friends, so therefore we can start the re-education now. Because as we see, the 4th Industrial Revolution foundation is definitely here. Robots, algorithms, drones, taking humanity out the picture. We have to re-educate. But let's get into the video.
Part 1. King Joshua and Grandma Tam save the village. Part 2. King Joshua and Grandma Tam save New York from COVID-33. Part 3. King Joshua and Grandma Tam goes to China.
It's mandatory to get part 1, part 2, and part 3 of this series. It's time to re-educate Generation Z.